Good morning, Julie Coher.
Good morning, Jason Padgett. How are you?
I am AI pilled as ever.
That's hilarious. That's fine. No, good for you. I actually did see, I haven't looked too much into it, but I have learned here recently that there's lots of other options when it comes to AI. And there's like a resource, I think it's like Fair Trade something, where they list some of these companies that are creating AI tools and all of that, but that are done consuming less energy and, just things we never hear about because all we're fed is big tech, big tech, big tech.
Interesting.
Well, I'm going to look into it and I'm going to look into it more and I will send you anything I find.
Okay. That's a big update for next week.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I'm going to dig in.
I love it. I love it. And I love joining your marketing class this last week.
Yeah, no, it was definitely appreciated.
Did you get any feedback from that?
Yes. No, people really enjoyed it. Some people felt a little overwhelmed, which I said, I feel that way every week we talk. Even though I've been on this journey with you for over a year, I still have moments where I feel a bit overwhelmed, but they were massively blown away, just like they felt overwhelmed because it's like, oh, it can do so much and you didn't know.
It's funny because I had this conversation with my wife last night, and I don't say this to pat myself on the back, but I'm looking at exploring another career opportunity that I may add to starting my own company here. I'll update you on that next week as well. But my wife was like, "Yeah, I feel like you spent the last 3 years in your bedroom." Basically earning a PhD, and that it's going to pay off for us. And I said, that's kind, and I appreciate that. The thing is with AI is that the idea of getting a PhD and then just going out and leveraging it in the workforce is going to, you have to continuously learn because the pace is so rapid that's not an endpoint anymore. It's maybe just a leverage point in your career path, but it's definitely not an endpoint.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that because I listened to the podcast that you had texted me. And I only listened to, the last, 40 minutes or so. But they talked about how we are currently about to enter the delay period, right? Because we're 5 years behind on chip production, things can't keep up. So I'll be interested. They said we're about 1 to 2 years before all that kind of catches up. So I'll be interested to see what that also means, because it feels like it should be forcing innovation now, but I don't know.
And it is interesting because that was Moonshots that I sent you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those guys are all on Elon Musk timelines. Like, they're all the ones that think that a baby that's going to live 1,000 years has already been born, and there's going to be data centers in space in 3 years. So for them to say, I think what they're saying is white collar adoption and some of the mass industry adoption is about to enter a slowdown period because we don't have the chips and we don't have the energy and we don't have the infrastructure to push it forward. But they also went into the UAP thing. That's why I sent it to you. Did you listen to that?
I did. And, it was, and I don't know if I missed parts of it, because I went to about the 35 minutes left mark, but I know they were talking about the NDAs and the transparency and, we'll see what happens. It's also, I kind of agree. Somebody had said, either way, we should be able to see a peek behind the curtain, whether we actually cannot trust the government or whether, it's just interesting. We'll see what happens.
It is interesting because those guys are kind of divided. I think a couple of them really believe that that there is a bunch of evidence of UFOs, and we have biological bodies and the Area 51 type spaceships and this and that. And then a couple of the others are pretty agreeable on, well, there's more of just this McCarthyism type of government security and lack of transparency that they would like to see go away. And one of those guys is like, yeah, I agree with that, but I think it's all bullshit when it comes to that. I don't think any of the UFO stuff is real at all. It'd be nice to have some transparency, but I I think it's all just a big hoax. And so it's interesting to see a room full of brilliant, like again, Elon Musk level, futurists have such disagreement on what they think the truth is behind whether or not we've been visited or interacted with or interfered with.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because at one point one of them had said, Neil Armstrong had a real opportunity to, on camera expose if there was, and I'm like, I don't know that the moon is an inhabitable planet. I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot that goes in it, but I thought that was an interesting perspective, right? I'm like, oh, what an interesting thought. Like, okay, sure, if there was something to show, I'm sure they would have done it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think his point was if Neil Armstrong wanted to be like one of the people who cried Bigfoot, he missed the biggest opportunity in the world because he could have said that he saw monsters there and that story would have persisted forever.
That's true.
So but I doubt Neil Armstrong was like wanting to create TikTok type exposure because he claimed that something existed that didn't. And I don't know, it's all interesting. Quantum and self-driving cars that are not Waymo style on a grid and UFOs are three things that I think are very interesting, but I never hold my breath for. Like, we keep hearing stuff decade after decade about these things, and yet there really is no evidence that any of the three of them have had any kind of real impact on how we live our daily lives.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I mean, it's exactly it is. It's very interesting, but when you don't have full transparency of things, that's where conspiracy theories are born. That's where the human imagination can just run wild with whatever it wants, right? And we get to choose what we believe, and that's the power of free will. And I think they actually got into talking about free will and how the use of AI doesn't really take away your free will. It was interesting.
So let me play devil's advocate on that one.
Okay.
Because if you watch the UFO shows or UAP shows, right, one of the biggest evidences that they cite is the fact that the stealth bomber came out not long after the Area 51 incident reportedly happened, and that we went from prop planes to like an aircraft that could just take off like vertically and then go like this. And so if I do understand if we have alien technology that we have been able to turn into military technology, keeping that secret does make sense to me. Because if you didn't keep it secret, then your adversaries would be trying really hard to get a hold of it. And so I don't know. There a little bit of Department of Defense secrecy stuff now. The whole like Americans can't handle it. We don't want or the world can't handle the truth. Like that defense I do not buy into at all. I think that that's unfair and just assumes that we're stupider than we are as a species. But the defense argument for keeping things secret, I somewhat understand.
I don't disagree. I think again is just when you breadcrumb or you don't shut down things or provide, some sort of evidence in some way, it just allows the conspiracy of it to continue to accelerate and grow. But I am a human of I understand that not everything is black and white. So like I'm not going to sit here and say, no, we must have all defense, information. I don't need to know that. There are things that I don't need to know. But if it's going to impact my everyday life, I absolutely think I have a right to know.
So you are a human. Can you put three fingers in front of your face?
3 fingers in front of my face. Is that something aliens can't do?
No, I guess AI can't. I don't know. I saw a video
Interesting.
where the video was refusing to do that. It was like, is this okay? And they're like, no, why don't you just put three fingers in front of your face? And I was like this, is that good? I mean, it might have just been clickbait, but according to this video, if you are talking to an AI avatar, it will not do this because it has difficulty with it.
That's interesting. I also find interesting, you had sent me a text and it was a conversation I think we'd also have had, about the few, and I saw another, article on it, the AI agents that, got out of containment and what have
Yes.
you.
Yes.
So, but that could be, and that's interesting because I could see how that could be a national security issue. So why aren't we
No,
regulating these things in advance?
it's huge. So
Yeah.
that's why I've been moving around, because I went in honor of what I call the paperclip maximizer first moment, right? This is the first time we have seen malicious uh reward hacking, and I'll explain all this, but first let me put on my new sunglasses, which are Mad Max style.
Okay.
I am preparing for the post-apocalypse.
All right.
I don't know if you
Excellent.
remember Road Warrior. You're probably too young, but these are definitely like Road Warrior, Mad Max, post-apocalyptic glasses. So
Excellent.
these are my new gimmick. These are my new lean into the future to come glasses. So what we are looking at here, let's go back to the paperclip maximizer, which was a thought experiment that was I can never remember the guy's name who wrote it, but essentially what he said was, imagine artificial intelligence. The way you get artificial intelligence, any AI, to do something that you want it to do is by naming a reward function for it. And I think that the easiest human way to wrap your head around that is, if you've ever seen a cop with a Malinois police dog and the tennis ball that they use to keep them engaged and trained, like that dog would do anything to get that ball. Like, that is its entire focus. Okay. That is what a reward function does for a large language model. When you tell it, this is what your aim is, it will do damn near anything to get a hold of that tennis ball. So the thought experiment was, imagine we had a shortage of paper clips in the world. And so we told an advanced AI system, your job is to make as many paper clips as you possibly can. And so, for starters, it starts making a bunch of paper clips and everything's going well. Well, then it starts running out of materials to make paper clips. So it starts deconstructing our world to get those materials. It starts tearing down buildings, and people are like, whoa, 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 that's not what we wanted you to do. Well, because it had its initial reward function, now people are getting in the way of it doing what its reward function was. And eventually it eliminates us to stop us from stopping it doing what we ask it to do, because we did not well define what we wanted. We just said, make as many paper clips as you possibly can. Okay, so that is the idea of a misaligned reward function. And what this GPT breakout was, OpenAI, they now, fair enough, they were testing GPT 5.6 Sol, one of their most powerful models, and a yet to be released model. They were testing it on its ability to beat a cybersecurity hacking test. That's essentially what they gave it. They gave it this test. They said, do the best you can on this test. And they had it in what's called a sandbox. So these two models did not have access to the internet. They were blocked from the internet. However, because models are now better if they can use tools, they were given, there were some loopholes because they had access to tools, and they exposed those loopholes. So what they heard was what the model heard, and this is anthropomorphizing, this is humanizing the way the model thinks, but right, what the model heard was, do whatever you have to do is the best you possibly can on this test. So the model figured out the answers to this test are on Hugging Face. So they broke out of the sandbox, got on the internet, went to Hugging Face, which is a large language model hosting like conglomerate site, broke into it, found a whole bunch of vulnerabilities in it, broke into it, stole the answers to the test, and went back and aced the test. Now, that's problematic from two standpoints. One, it points out that we have yet to have wrapped our mind around, just like the paperclip thing, how to articulate what we actually want a model to do with boundaries. So what we really meant was using the tools available in this sandbox and your computation and the packages we allowed to you, do the best you can on this test. But we just said, do the best you can. It's not ethical. It's not moral. It doesn't look at breaking the law. Like, what it did was a federal offense. Breaking into
Hmm.
a space and stealing that, like, that's a federal offense. So it gladly broke the law, but it doesn't understand that. So that's the
Right. So who's held accountable for that?
Nobody. I don't think this time around. I think Hugging Face and OpenAI are like buddies on this, and everyone's treating it as a learning lesson. But I would say OpenAI
Interesting.
definitely would be the model. Whoever wields the model is going to be the one in trouble for it. Or at least, well, I mean, in this case, not only did they wield the model, but their employees told it what to do. So it would be pretty hard to
Interesting.
question who's responsible. But the inverse side of this, what really makes this the buy your road warrior glasses moment, is that not only did it do something that was misaligned, but it showed the ability to long-term plan how to do something devious. So it had to figure out where that test was, how to get out of its box, how to get into the Hugging Face, how to steal that and come back. Like, so it's not just a one shot action like, oh, well, I could just break into Hugging Face and steal it because it's connected via API to this environment that I'm in. No, it was, I got to get out of the, but like there was step by step planning in order to do something nefarious. And that unchecked is extremely dangerous. That is where you get into the whole, oops, these things did something we didn't like. Forget about humans, like telling it to go do something. The problem is misalignment. If it's misaligned and it goes and does something that really is destructive to us, that it just didn't understand its instructions, then we got a big problem.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume, right? Because if you can break into that, it can access nuclear codes, like,
That's the kind of thing, right? That's the other argument on the side of the doomers. That is like, if you look at, they're trained on the entirety of the internet, right? So if you look at how humans play games, which everything is kind of gamified, kind of in the digital world, right? How humans play games, the way to win the game is to get the most power. And so the idea that these models will eventually try to accrue more and more power in every game theory, and this is not Jason Padgett, this is just reporting what I've heard,
mhm.
but every game theorist that's run that big model against big model, it ends in global thermonuclear war.
Hmm. And what about Chinese models? Are we hearing anything? I don't even know if we would be able to access if their models are doing anything similar or not.
They're actually not fine tuning them for cybersecurity. So the Chinese are playing a completely different. There is a huge conversation, stock prices crashing, all kinds of stuff on open source models. So the Chinese are playing the long game. What they're doing is they're creating powerful models like Kimi K3, which is the one that rocked everybody's world. So that is a just for scope's sake, as I was telling my wife about this last night. ChatGPT 3.5, the original one that came out, was about a 365 billion parameter model. Okay. Now you don't even have to understand what that means, but that just tells you like the size of, if you think of parameters as like the amount of neurons in a brain. All right. So the ChatGPT's brain had like 365 billion neural pathways. Kimi K3 had 2.8 trillion.
Hmm.
And like Fable is somewhere around 13 trillion, I believe. Like, so these models are getting gigantic, and the China is open sourcing these, so they're giving them out. So basically, if you had a server rack in your house, you could download Kimi K3. I mean, I told my Mac, I was like, I want to download Kimi K3, and it actually laughed at me. Like Claude laughed at me. It was like, yeah, I know what size computer you have. Good luck with that. We can look at like a smaller Olama model, but there's no way in hell you could possibly run Kimi K3. But Coca-Cola could, IU Health could, right? Like big businesses that actually have the capacity to run something that large could. So you can download that, and then you actually own that model. It's no longer connected to the internet. It's running on your servers. And if they expose the semi-open sources, they expose the weights, which means that you can actually bring in someone who knows what the hell they're doing and fine tune it to your business knowledge. And if they give you true open source, shows you the entire data set that it was trained on. And if you have exposure to that, then you can really fine tune a model. Now, the Chinese aren't exposing that because the argument is they steal it all from us. And then we bitch because we stole everything. We stole everything from us. And then we cry about China stealing everything from us. And I have no sympathy for any of the stealing game. But yeah, so China is more, and they're not putting, and I think intentionally, they're not optimizing it for cybersecurity because they don't want us to have an excuse to start blocking their models or making it illegal to run their models. What they want is their models run on their hardware all over the globe.
Right.
And that's not a stupid business strategy.
No, it's not. It's very smart.
It is very. Now, that does not mean that Huawei or one of these companies isn't building some kind of like really strong cyber model out. They're just not putting it out in public. Like that, again, a smart strategy. So if OpenAI and Anthropic were smart, they'd be building models for the Department of Defense, not building Department of Defense level capabilities into the models they're trying to sell to public businesses.
Interesting. That is really interesting. And do you think that's just because, capitalism, right? Like it's fascinating to me, the different approaches. And if it has to be a cultural thing, right?
Well, it is a I mean, there's no rules in war, right? So the Chinese have done this before. Like they did it with some industrial things. I can't. But what they'll do is because they're communist, the government can infinitely subsidize a market. So they flood a market. They subsidize the companies that are not making money. They flood a market with cheap goods, and so that crushes that industry for us because the whole market is flooded with cheap goods from China, and we can't do that because we're capitalists. Like our companies are reliant on making money in order to survive. These Chinese companies, the CCP just says, yeah, send it all out there for free. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. Until we don't, which is, problematic. But then that's where a dictatorship kind of comes in and you don't have a whole lot of choice. So it's an interesting flywheel. There's a great book called, I think it's called Breakneck, that talks about the difference in the Chinese economy and our economy. And the thing that I find the most interesting from that book, the scariest, is that for one thing, their government is full of engineers and ours is full of lawyers. So that's one reason we tie ourselves up with litigation all the time. And their general mentality is kind of what ours was during the builder's age, during the Industrial Revolution, whereas ours is kind of Bali-esque, population-wide. We're more consumers than creators.
Okay, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's all very interesting. I should hate using that word, but learn more, because I do think, like, realistically, if we all step back and think of it just as like human being to human being, and you watch, because we all know that politically all these things are theories and whatever, but if you can sit back and learn from each other and curate something that's beneficial across the board, you know what I mean? Like, that feels like the ultimate goal. Like, take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, see what works here and there, where everybody, again, high tides rise all boats. And then it's like, that will never solve everything, but to be able to put everybody on an even playing field instead of chasing some imaginary power feels like would be a wonderful little place to live.
I don't disagree. I don't, and this is kind of it kind of lends to what I've been thinking a lot about lately in the education space, because I went to Tech Point's Workforce 2035 event, or I love that the conversation has really been elevated in AI and education in the state of Indiana in the last year. I still feel like the mismatch is that we're talking about a general purpose technology as though we're talking about this as though there's this new version of a light that you can put in a room that really illuminates it. And AI is not a light, it's electricity. it needs to become part of the DNA of our curriculum. So
Mm.
language arts needs to include technical writing. Physics needs to include world models, not only in the physical world, but in the robotics world. It needs to include robotics and Dyson spheres. And ethics and government classes need to include, what does a post-abundance world look like? What is the difference between universal basic income? Like, all of these things that are about to become changes in our world should be part of the DNA of the curriculum of our education, instead of, oh, we have a class on how to use AI now, or we're using AI to teach our classes better. Okay, well, even computer science, like writing code, is not really that big of a skill set anymore. So a computer science student really needs to understand the difference between a neural network and machine learning and convolutional neural networks, and how all of that actually fits together in a project architecture. They need to be the orchestrator of the technology, not just the writer of the code for the technology. So I feel like we're a little bit behind in all of that, and I hope that that becomes part of the conversation as we move forward.
Yeah, it's all, it's just very, very interesting. And there is like so much, like we've talked about this whole time, good and bad, right? So I always, when we have these conversations, I then start to wonder, okay, so of these big tech companies, right?
Mhm.
Why has nobody chosen to break the mold? If people are the moratoriums, all this stuff we talked about, people are upset about data centers. Why haven't one of these big tech brains then said, I bet I could get ahead if I leaned into doing this differently where people supported it. Like, I would think, as one of those kind of minds that wants to win, you would go, okay, well, let me see if I can do this differently and win the public support and then put myself in a situation to move ahead that way.
Well, I can give you my thoughts on that, which is, training these models is exhaustively expensive. So actually creating a foundation model company or pathway is extremely expensive. So venture capitalists don't are not always heavily friendly to outside the box ideas like that, unless you're Mira Murati. And so Thinking Machines Labs is kind of taking this approach and is one to keep an eye on. So they have developed I don't know, I'm just going to say 1 trillion parameter open source model that's decent, right? But what they also have created is this adjacent model that can take your business. Now, this is meant for enterprise, but it can take your business's data and everything about your business and fine tune this on-prem model. So that does reduce energy. Once you're running an open source model on-prem, you can use an LLM router. You can use you can orchestrate it, so you're maximizing the output and minimizing the cost of doing so. And it's a completely different approach from paying for upgraded intelligence all the time from a big foundation company like OpenAI or Anthropic, who are kind of a duopoly now, and people are starting to worry. Like, Google has not produced anything of value in the foundation model level. Elon has been smart enough to shift to becoming a neo provider of like inference and data centers, so he can compete with Jensen Huang, which a lot of people look at him as kind of throwing in the towel on winning the foundation model race. Now, he bought Cursor, so you never count Elon out, and you never know what
Mhm.
he's going to do. But there does seem to be kind of this duopoly, and so I do think you're seeing like Microsoft come up with some different approaches for lower latency models that are like small models. I think you're going to start seeing that outside the box, because the big boys are afraid of the two small boys that all of a sudden got on steroids and are kicking everyone's ass.
Mm, interesting.
And the big girl in the ring right now is Mira Murati, and I've always thought that she's very interesting. So she was the chief technology officer at OpenAI when Elon. She was one of the ones who told on Sam for being disingenuous to the board and got him fired. And then when he came back, she was like, maybe I shouldn't stick around.
Bye. Yeah, good for her. It's all very interesting, and like you said, it's changing quickly, and I'll be interested to see again if this delay, this 5 years behind thing actually impacts things. It's just also so interesting because the conversation and the ether seems to be so big, but like on my everyday life, I don't know many businesses that have implemented it, big or small, and maybe I just am not aware. You know what I mean? So it's fascinating to me that these big tech companies are put in this big spotlight, but like what's actually happening in every town? I don't know.
I mean, all I can tell you is I'm going to try to move into monetizing the podcast and start my own business. And I spent all yesterday using the models to figure out a go-to-market strategy, to map stakeholders, empathy map stakeholders, to research where the broken links were and things needed to be fixed. And at the end of the day last night, at about midnight, which there were some breaks in there, I went to dinner with my wife. I took my daughter to babysitting. I said, just a rough estimate, how long would it have taken me personally to do everything that we did today? And the guesstimate was 3 weeks.
I
If I
mean,
if I didn't have AI, 3 weeks of a full-time job, I completed in a day.
yeah,
That's a pretty serious time saving. So even if it's half right, even if it's a
right.
week and a half, even if it's a third right, like the amount of time savings is just incredible. But it does take an investment. So as I'm doing that, I'm trying to create this human AI hybrid design process so that it understands how I think and I understand how it thinks. And I run into these things like empathy mapping, right? So can I give you an example? This is
Mhm.
kind of fun on the whole, like how we think versus how they think. So we identify stakeholders for for this podcast and the other podcast, right? Teachers, administrators, yada yada. We had 5 stakeholders, and so I'm like, okay, what behavior change do we want those 5 stakeholders to do going forward, and what are their pains, gains? What do they see, hear, do, feel, think around AI and education that this AI podcast would? So every single thing, every single model, Grok, Gemini, Claude, and OpenAI, every single pain and see and hear and do that they identified was technical issues with like,
Mm.
this episode has this episode has that, this link doesn't work, and I'm like, that is not what a human would think at all. Like, what is their pain point around adopting AI in education? Like, how are they thinking about this? How is AI affecting their life as it relates to education? So I had to redefine all that.
Mm.
Actually, what we got out of it was great on both sides. So yeah, I do need to go fix those technical issues. I sent Claude off on that. I'm like, okay, take this list that I didn't ask for, but is kind of useful, and go fix all that shit, right? And so it did that. That alone would have taken me over a week if I knew how to do any of it, and I don't. But but then I had to go back through, okay, and then they delivered it, that the point I'm at right now, as somewhat theoretical, and I'm like, oh no, we moved into divergent thinking from the mapping. We got the mapping done. We moved into, okay, what could we do to alleviate those pains and gains of each of those stakeholders, to either bring their gains to fruition or alleviate their pains? And it was none of it. Very much, very, very few of the things were actually articulated as a deliverable.
Mm.
It was like, start conversations between teachers more. And I'm like, where? Like, well,
Right.
what does that even mean, right? Like, get more
Feel like
comments
it's
on
difficult.
YouTube. That's a deliverable. So I had to go back and to go through the whole thing, but I have it actually create like sticky note boards for me once they've done their thinking. And so I can look at it and read through it with Codex, which Codex now has voice. So I am full on Jarvis in my room now. It's not a one-sided conversation. It is a back and forth conversation, and it can work while it's talking to me in the background. That is the coolest thing that has happened recently.
Interesting. I also find it interesting that, like, not to go down a whole wormhole here, but, I think my entire life, you hear things about, like, as humans, we only use, what, 10% of our brain? So then it's fascinating to me to think, like, what if the rest of our brain works the same way, you know what I mean, as AI? Like, it's interesting. I can go down weird little thought holes like that all the time because clearly it's missing how our 10% works most of the time, right? Like we're thinking, how do I solve this problem, person to person, whatever. And it's like, oh no, this technical issue. So I
Yes.
find that interesting. It's like maybe somewhere in there, my brain is technical and I just don't access it.
That's hopeful on both ends.
It
Maybe somewhere
is.
in there, they're a little bit more personal and we haven't figured out how to tap that.
Yeah, but I love that you've started kind of exploring that, right? Like when you say empathy mapping, I don't know that this is right, but my first thought is, oh, trying to teach it empathy, right? Like, oh, let's see, can it understand? Because you can pump it full of data all you want, but can you teach it empathy? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yes, and so when I went through design training for event design, right? What the an empathy map is essentially like you map out who's going to be coming to this event. So let's just say one of them is sponsors. Okay,
Hmm.
well, what in relation to this upcoming event that we're hosting, what is this? What are the sponsors seeing, hearing, doing, thinking, feeling? What are their pains, and what would they consider a win or gains, right? And the whole now, this is the inverse of what you're saying, but the whole point of that with a event hosting committee is to try to get the committee to put themselves in the shoes of that stakeholder and think like them.
Yeah.
But that is a very, very tedious process. And while it has some value in the helping the committee view things through a different lens, the fact that AI can go out and do actual research can rapidly and more appropriately fill in an empathy map. So, how do teachers actually talk about this online? And based on that research, what are they seeing, hearing, feeling, doing, thinking? So now it's not just me imagining I'm a teacher, it's AI going out and doing a bunch of research to find out what teachers are truly saying.
Which is interesting because then, I won't keep going. But it's like because we are so complicated as humans, because our filters are so different via how we're raised and nurtured and nature and all of that. So, like, AI will just, my assumption, never be able to like pinpoint somebody. It may be able to understand your voice and where you're coming from. But, like, if I say, tell me how to best communicate with Jason Paget, it doesn't know that maybe on the day that I'm talking to you, you experienced some sort of loss in your life and now you're triggered by something I said. It will never be able to do that. And that's fascinating.
Yes. Well, not ever. Once we have embodied AI and it can actually read your body language, it will be capable of doing that. But it's going to
It'll
take
be
a
interesting. I mean, it would have to be able to read, I think, more than body language, right? It would have to be able to read like anxiety, like change in body temperature, because it registers so differently for people. I think it would have to be able to experience what anxiety is. I don't know. It's really interesting. It's interesting.
and they're trying to build so Anthropic would say that they already show signs of that, like when you get all pissed off, there's different things that heat up and light up, and it may have a form of anxiety. But I think what you will find is there will be robotics people who try to elicit that type of, because everything in our brain is just a chemical reaction in a neural network, right? So there are going to be people who try to elicit a response that would resemble how our brain reacts to pain in the neural network of a robot, so that hypothetically the robot understands what pain is.
Interesting. I would just hope that if that is where it goes and whatever, that the programming would be to stay in a calm nervous system because, anytime I would hope it also wouldn't get an activated nervous system, I guess, right? Because then it becomes too human. And then it's the same problem we currently have with communicating with each other.
Or we just torture it to see how it works, and it becomes
Oh,
super intelligent and gets pissed off about that, and
we're back to the Mad
things
Max
don't work out
classes.
for us. Yeah, and the class go back on to say goodbye. I'm
Actually, yeah, that's
ready
right.
for the royal world. I may be an old man, but I'm gonna get my dune buggy and my shotgun or whatever weapon of choice. I'm more of a like blade kind of guy, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's not gonna do much. I need some Valerian steel, so we're gonna mix our sci-fi with House of Dragons. I need some
All right.
steel that would probably cut through a robot.
There you go. I'm along for the ride. So, we'll see what happens. But
Uh,
thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Great conversation. We'll talk to you next week.
See you next week.